This is Xinhua News. China has decided not to impose additional tariffs on certain imports from Canada from March 1st to December 31st, 2026, the Ministry of Commerce said on Friday. Such tariffs were previously imposed following an anti-discrimination probe.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says his government has reached a landmark deal that will see China slash tariffs on Canadian canola. In exchange, Canada will allow tens of thousands of Chinese-made electric vehicles into the country. This is a major shift in a relationship that has been tense for years with a fraught trade war.
By March the 1st, Canada expects that China will lower tariffs on Canadian canola seed to a combined rate of approximately 15%. China is a $4 billion canola seed market for Canadian producers, and this change represents a significant drop from the current combined tariff levels of 84%.
All right, on to the House. It voted today to rebuke President Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans joined Democrats, passing a resolution to repeal those tariffs. It seeks to end the national emergency that the president declared to impose those tariffs. But the rare bipartisan vote against the White House agenda is largely symbolic. Actually, undoing the policy would require support from Trump himself. The resolution is now heading to the Senate.
Senate Democrats are demanding immediate refunds for their constituents after the Supreme Court shot down most of President Trump's tariffs. They say the Trump administration has collected more than $130 billion in what they describe as illegal taxes and accuse them of refusing to give that money back to Americans. Now, it's not just Democrats that are demanding refunds. More than 1,000 companies have already sued the Trump administration to recoup the costs of President Trump's tariffs.
North America just got a reality check. Not from a summit. Not from a treaty. But from two things that don't wait for diplomacy. Markets. And courts. Because while Washington threatens and postures, Canada keeps moving. Quietly, strategically, and with receipts. Now here's the shock that ties it all together. Canada cut a China deal that tests America's tariff wall. China is now implementing real tariff rollbacks for Canada. And a US Supreme Court ruling has just dismantled a major chunk of the Trump tariff machine. So this isn't just a trade story. It's a power story. It's about leverage being built, used, and suddenly legally removed. Now here's the breaking update. Canada's China reset is no longer just an announcement. It's moving into implementation. China has said it will suspend several tariffs on Canadian exports starting March 1st, running through the end of 2026. That includes suspending the 100% tariffs on Canadian canola meal and peas. And suspending the 25% tariffs on lobster and crab. And there's more. China has now issued a final ruling on canola. The anti-dumping tariff on Canadian canola was cut from a preliminary 75.8% down to 5.9%. With China's standard 9% import tariff, that's a total duty of 14.9%. Effective March 1st. And locked in for 5 years. That's not a vague promise. That's a legal, dated, multi-year move. Now let's add the EV wedge. Canada's earlier move still stands. Up to 49,000 China-made EVs per year can enter under most favored nation terms at 6.1%, instead of being hit by Canada's 100% EV tariff wall. And here's a twist most people didn't anticipate. Reuters reporting suggests Tesla could be an early winner, because it can export Canada-spec vehicles from Shanghai and already has a Canadian network. So this is no longer just Canada lets China in. It's Canada opens a channel that reshapes who benefits, who competes, and who panics. Now, before we go deeper, let's do the quick scoreboard. Winners right now include Canadian farmers, because China just delivered real tariff relief. Canadian consumers, because EV price competition becomes more plausible under the quota channel. China, because it gains market access and leverage through economic cooperation. And potentially Tesla, because it can exploit the quota channel faster than new Chinese entrants. Losers include US automakers and US tariff strategists, because the North American unified wall against China is now visibly split. And the biggest risk is clear: a more politicized, more hostile USMCA review climate. Now, let's move to reactions, because reactions tell you where pressure goes next. Washington's reaction has been consistently alarmed. The US position is basically this: Canada is creating a breach in North America's China EV blockade. And even if Chinese EVs don't physically enter the US market, competition still crosses borders. Price comparisons cross. Consumer expectations cross. Political pressure crosses. If Canadians can access lower-cost EVs, Americans will ask why they can't. If automakers face a price gap, they lobby. If they lobby, policy hardens. So the US response tends to follow the same playbook: security framing, tighter restrictions, and pressure on allies to align. Now here's the TradEconomics lens, early and simple. This is not just trade. This is leverage management. Canada is building options inside a system where US market access has increasingly been used as a political tool. China is offering selective relief to lock in influence and supply. And the US is trying to keep its perimeter disciplined. Now let's break down the deeper logic. Start with the old assumption. For decades, Canada's economic identity was built around one gravitational center, the US market. But that dependence has been showing stress signals. In October 2025, Canada's exports to the United States fell to their lowest share since 1997. That data point matters because it signals behavior change, contracts, routing decisions, diversification pressure, and risk hedging. And there was another tell that your audience should not ignore. Without a surge in gold exports, Canada would have posted a multi-billion-dollar trade deficit in that period. When precious metals start masking weakness in normal trade flows, it's often a stress marker, not a strength marker. So Canada is operating under pressure. Pressure from tariff threats. Pressure from uncertainty. Pressure from political volatility. And this is where the China deal fits. It's not ideology. It's insurance. Canada is trying to reduce single market vulnerability before the next bargaining cycle becomes more coercive. Now bring in the new major development, the US Supreme Court decision. Because this changes the leverage environment in a way most people haven't processed yet. The US Supreme Court struck down Trump's sweeping tariffs imposed under emergency powers, specifically rejecting the use of IEEPA for those tariffs. That ruling hits a central pillar of Trump's tariff strategy. And for Canada, this is a double-edged shift. On the one hand, it can reduce the credibility of certain broad tariff threats that were built on emergency authority. On the other hand, it injects legal uncertainty into the trade environment, refund questions, replacement tariff pathways, and political escalation to reassert control. Here's the key TradEconomics point. A tariff weapon doesn't disappear when one legal pathway collapses. It mutates. The ruling doesn't end tariff politics. It forces Washington to look for other tools, other statutes, other mechanisms, procurement controls, regulatory friction, section-based tariffs, retaliation through different channels. So yes, the Supreme Court ruling can weaken one form of leverage. But it can also trigger a new round of improvisation. And that matters for USMCA. Because the USMCA review isn't just a meeting. It's a forcing mechanism. It amplifies threats. It hardens positions. And it turns uncertainty into bargaining power. Now at the new twist, the US enters this period with part of its tariff arsenal legally challenged. So Washington faces a choice. Option 1, de-escalate and stabilize relationships. Option 2, prove it still has coercive capacity by shifting tactics. Historically, hegemonic power tends to choose option 2. Now, look at Canada's posture under this environment. Canada is not standing still. Canada is building alternatives. The China deal is one alternative. And the implementation steps matter. China didn't just say nice words. China put dates on the calendar. March 1st. End of 2026. 5-year canola duty framework. So Canada gets something crucial in a leverage contest. Predictability. Farmers can plan. Exporters can price. Buyers can contract. And that is exactly what tariff volatility destroys. Now let's talk consequences, because this is where the story becomes continental. First consequence, Canada's China hedge is now backed by enforceable policy moves, not just headlines. That strengthens Canada's negotiating psychology. Not because Canada can replace the US market overnight. It can't. Auto supply chains are integrated. Energy ties are deep. Manufacturing is built for North America. But bargaining isn't about replacing. Bargaining is about alternatives being credible enough to matter. Second consequence is, the EV channel introduces a structural split in North America's industrial policy. The US blocks Chinese EVs aggressively. Canada creates a quota channel under MFN. That divergence creates pressure. Pressure on US automakers. Pressure on US lawmakers. Pressure on USMCA talks. And the Tesla angle makes it even more disruptive. Because the China EV channel isn't only about BYD or NIO entering Canada. It may first benefit a US company using China-based manufacturing to exploit Canada's policy opening. That creates a political complication for Washington. How do you condemn the channel while one of your national champions benefits from it? Third consequence, the Supreme Court ruling changes the US credibility curve. If Trump's broad emergency tariffs are struck down, then threatening blanket tariffs becomes more complicated. But again, this doesn't eliminate coercion. It shifts it. So what does Washington do? It looks for other instruments. It escalates rhetorically. It weaponizes procurement. It pushes for alignment demands inside USMCA. It tries to regain leverage through the treaty itself. That's the most important piece. If you can't impose tariffs easily outside the agreement, you try to rewrite the agreement. That's why the USMCA review becomes more dangerous after the Supreme Court ruling. Because the treaty becomes the arena where Washington can reassert control. Now, let's connect these dots into one clean TradEconomics mechanism. Canada is advancing because it's doing three things at once. 1. It's diversifying market access to reduce single-point dependence. 2. It's securing real implementation wins, canola, seafood, peas, meal, on dates and legal rulings. 3. It's reshaping the EV market structure inside North America in a way that forces the US to react. And while the US threatens, the Supreme Court decision shows something uncomfortable. Even the hegemon has constraints. Not moral constraints. Institutional constraints. Legal constraints. So Canada's strategy isn't simply defy Washington. It's use time, law, and diversification to reduce Washington's leverage. Now we reach the final take. This deal is no longer theoretical. China has taken concrete steps. Tariffs are being suspended. Canola duties are being reset for years. And the US tariff weapon has just been partially disarmed by the Supreme Court, at least through one key emergency pathway. So Canada enters the USMCA review environment with something it didn't have before. Options. And predictability in at least one major export channel. But make no mistake. The US will not simply accept a split perimeter and a Canada hedge without response. The response may not be the same tariffs. It may be a new legal pathway. A new instrument. Or pressure inside the treaty itself. That's the coming collision. So here's the question that matters. Is Canada's China hedge smart insurance that strengthens sovereignty? Or does it provoke Washington into rewriting USMCA in a harder, more coercive direction? And here's the second question. Does the Supreme Court ruling make North America safer, because it limits unilateral tariffs? Or does it make it more unstable, because it forces Washington to improvise and escalate elsewhere? Drop your view in the comments. And if you want short, sharp TradEconomics briefings that track power through markets, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trade wars don't always start with declarations. Sometimes they start with a deal. Sometimes they start with a court ruling. And sometimes they start with a data point.